right, so I think now we're able to kind of just get into things. So it's a little maybe hard to kind of pick a topic, but I think a great one to start out with JavaScript and any programming language is variables. So we probably all know variables from math, but they're a little different in computer science. Variables really just allow us to store and name our data throughout our program. And the way we do that in JavaScript is like this. Let's say we want to talk about someone's age. I use the let keyword, and then I give the variable a name. We'll call it age, since that's what it's going to represent. And then I can give it a value. So I'm going to give this the value, a number 34. So here we would say I'm declaring a variable age, and I'm assigning the value 34. I could assign it the value, 234. It doesn't really matter. I could call this variable, X, but we'll see later. We want to name our variables something that have some meaning. And then I can come down here and I can do a console.log of age. So you can go ahead and run this. And there we go, 23. So some other things we can do. If I come up here and just try to do console.log age, and if I get rid of this code above by deleting this, now JavaScript is not going to like this. We get an error. We can see we get age is not defined. All right, well, let's define age. Let age equal 23. I'll save this. Once again, getting this same error, even though age is defined right here, the problem here is I'm trying to use it before I've defined it. So with JavaScript, I actually need to define it first, and then I can use it. And there it is. And then I can use it more in my app. I could do like a console.log. I could take my age and then I could add one to it. That's 24. Now here I'm not actually changing the age value. I'm just adding one right there. If I were to log age again, it's still 23. Here it is logging 24. Here it's 23. So I can reassign my variable age. If I do this, I could say, hey, age equals age plus 1. And then I could do a console.log age. So here I'm reassigning the value of age. Right here, I would say I am declaring, this is how I would say it. Now, this is important, these words. So I'm declaring a variable called age and assigning it the value 23. And here I am reassigning the age variable to age plus 1. Cool. So as we saw, if I just delete this and do a console.log age, this is not going to work because age is undefined. Well, I can come up here. I can just declare the variable. I could do this. I could say let age. And if I run this, this value now is undefined. Now it's a little confusing, but undefined actually is a value. Notice how it's not throwing an error. If I don't have this there, we get a reference error that age is not defined. So there's my error. Now, error is important because my code stops here. So we can see this, I got here. So your code starts at the top and it runs line by line. But if there's an error, so in this case, this is now an error. You can see if I run this, I don't log this I got here. But if I declare my variable, now this is going to be undefined. So it does log this, it doesn't break my code, and then we keep on continuing to run. So that's another little distinction you'll see throughout this is if we get an error, our code's going to stop. If we just log undefined, the computer knows about that. That's actually a defined value. So let's talk about variable names. So there are a few rules when it comes to naming variables that JavaScript cares about. So our variable names must start with a letter, or they can start with a $sign or underscore. They can contain numbers, but they cannot start with a number. So I could say number 1. And then they can be alphanumeric. So I can have symbols in here. I can have, well, we'll see. I can have like they can start with a $sign or a underscore, and then they can have numbers. But yes, sorry, I said they cannot have like symbols. These are not valid variable names, and you can see the red lines letting me know that's not valid. But I can have numbers after this, and I can have underscores, but I can't have dashes. And we'll kind of see why, actually, because a dash is actually the subtraction sign, but I can have underscores. I can't also use things that are reserved words. Let's just go look at some of these reserved words. Reserved words are words in JavaScript, in the JavaScript language, that, we can't use. For example, we can't use, like, I can't name a variable function because that is a word in JavaScript. That's a reserved word in JavaScript. So here's some reserved words. We have break, case, catch, etc. These are words we can't call our variables because they're JavaScript words. Another thing to note about variables is they're case sensitive. So face is not the same as face or face, capital F. So the capitalization matters. But other than that, JavaScript, this is a valid variable name in JavaScript. But let's think about something else, why this is not a good variable name, and this is code readability. So there's another part to naming variables where you want the names to be descriptive of what they are. So for example, let's say I'm describing someone's hair color. Well, I could name that variable $x234, and we could console.log that. That is a valid variable name. But this is not very valid to a human because this is really not readable. Like, what is $x234? So when I come up with variable names, I should have them be descriptive. And in JavaScript, if we have a word like hair color, since I can't do a space, it's convention in JavaScript to do camel case. So camel case is where I start with a lowercase, all lowercase, and then if I get to a second word in that variable name, I'm going to capitalize the first letter. So hair color becomes hair, capital C color. You might also see it done with snake case, which we use an underscore, but it's more conventional in JavaScript to use camel case. And now I have a variable name that is a little more descriptive. So when I come down 10 years later and I read this code, I'm like, oh, see this variable name, I can see that's somebody's hair color probably. Another thing that we'll see, another keyword that we see with JavaScript is const. So we can have a variable that we can declare as a const. So we use the const keyword, and then we could use something like, let's do something like pi. Now think about pi. Pi is a number that does not change. So I'm going to declare it as a const. And we can come down here and do a const.log pi. Run this. Now, the nice thing about a const, and the reason why we declare a const, let's say I somehow accidentally think I want to change this variable, which, wouldn't make sense, but, we're coders, we sometimes make mistakes. So here I'm trying to reassign a const. And I'll go ahead and run this, and I get an error. See, here we get the type error. We're trying to reassign a const. So that's once I declare something as a const, I can't do that. If I use the let keyword, now it's not a constant, and I can reassign that. So that's just a quick little intro on variables. Variables really, once again, just give us a way to store these values in something that we can name and then access in our code later. And you'll see in your coding career that naming variables is very important, and it can actually kind of be a little challenging to come up with good, meaningful names. But I think we'll stop it here, and next we'll go on to data types.